Well, here's another variable example. And remember, we're just covering basic examples of using variables. Here we're going to talk about multiplying. But before we talk about multiplying and showing you some examples of the variables, I think it's important that we first determine what symbols are used in mathematics to indicate multiplication. So here I'm going to show you the symbols, and then I will show you an example of the symbols, and then we can go ahead after that and I can show you some examples of using variables in multiplying using these three indicators. So here the first indicator of multiplication is a dot. You got to be careful because sometimes this dot can represent a decimal, right? Sometimes it can represent a decimal. So here, let me give you the example. When this dot is being used, you'll see something like this: 3 times 3. And in order to lessen the confusion, I think it's just better I use whole numbers to show you how to multiply here, rather than using symbols, which could be confusing. Another way to show you're multiplying is an X. You'll see this X, and it'll look something like this: 3 times 3. Another way you can see indicate an operation for multiplication would be a number right in front of a variable. So 3 times y. This means multiply. 3 times the y. And finally, a number outside of a parentheses of a number would also indicate multiplication. So these are the examples of how you will see operations explaining to you to multiply. So a dot between two terms is multiplying. Of course, an X between two terms is multiplying. 3 right next to a letter or a variable means to multiply. And then you have the number inside the parentheses with the number right outside the parentheses. This also indicates, to multiply. Now I'd like to use some examples below to show you in each of these what you would do with a specific variable using these symbols. So I'm going to use x times 3. So x times 3, remember, hey, there's that invisible 1 in front of the x. What's 3 times 1? And you can't forget that x value. Excuse me, using the other example, 3 with the x times 3. Here I'm going to use the variable y to show you. So 3 times, remember, that's an invisible 1y. Well, what's 3 times 1? Of course, it's 3. You got to keep that y attached, showing multiplication. Here you have 3 times y. Unless given a value to substitute for y, this would just remain the same. 3y is just 3y, or 3 times the value of y. If y was given, y equals 5, then you could substitute 5 for y, and it would look like this final example, which I will show you now. 3 times, let's say the value of y was 5. I would substitute 5 for y. 3 times 5 equals, of course, 15. So these are some of the examples you will see using variables to multiply. Of course, when we get into the practice test problems, I will not only review these prerequisite skills and knowledge that you have to have, but I will also get into the more applicating step-by-step how to solve these different type of problems using variables and multiplying. I hope you find this helpful.